Happy Monday and welcome back to the Wolff Den presented by Win Again Academy in the club room. Mark Moyer with some great networking events. That's how I met my guest today. So check out Win Again and in the club room with Mark Moyer. I'm Matt Wolff, founder, CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today, Shirley Jump is our guest in the Wolff Den. How's everything going?
It's all good. Even though it's a Monday, it's all good.
All good for a Monday. One day closer
Yeah,
to Friday is
that's true. That's a good way to look at it.
That's what they say. Great to have you on here.
Thank
Excited
you.
to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. But for the people who don't know who you are and haven't met you yet, just give us a quick introduction and then we'll get into it.
So I started my career in journalism, went into marketing, and then eventually into books. And I've published more than I saw my bio, and I need to update that. 80 books in 24 countries. New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly, and Amazon bestselling author. But my primary day-to-day work is ghostwriting and editing books for celebrities, entrepreneurs, pretty much anybody.
So, how did you get into being a book writer? I mean, now it seems like it's everyone's writing a book or everyone's written a book,
Right.
wants to write a book, and they should, right? Whether
Mhm.
we'll talk about that. But obviously, you've been doing this for a while to get up to that number. So how did you get into that back in the day?
So when I was a little girl, I used to rewrite the endings of books that I didn't like. So I've always wanted to be an author from the time I could remember learning to read. My very first book contract actually came from an interview I did when I was working for a Boston paper. And I interviewed a children's television star from Boston that nobody recognizes outside of Boston. So if I mention his name, nobody knows who he is. But he had the number one show in Boston for 18 years. And he said, "You got everything right. I want you to write my book." This publishing company had been approaching him for a while. And that became my very first book. And after that, I ended up selling a lot of fiction to most of the big five. I've worked for everybody except for Random House, I think, in New York. And on the side, I kept doing client books for people that wanted somebody to ghostwrite. So I've always done both. And it's nice because it allows me to sort of switch up my day throughout the hours that I work.
What's the difference between writing a book for yourself and writing a book for someone else?
Well, freedom. When I write for myself, I can write whatever I want, right? But at the same time, it's sort of, it's also somewhat the same because you're writing to market, you're writing to capture people's imagination, you're writing to deliver something for the investment of time that they're giving you. So when I'm writing my own books, I think I'm even pickier about every single word than I am with a client because the client, you want it to have their voice, and I'm not going to, fuss over one word if they prefer it a different way. But with me, I'm continually trying to raise the bar for my own writing and for my own editing so that it all comes out better than what I could do a year ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah, I've actually started to write a book, and it was a while ago. It was on my, I guess, sort of my escapades as a single person, which I no
Hmm.
longer am single. So if I do write a book, it's probably going to have to be something else. But I sat I sat down and I just started writing, a chapter, and then it was funny because you try and think about other things that happen, and they were a while ago. It could have been 3 4 years ago. It almost reminds me of, like, my wife loves watching these, like, court TV, and these people are on trial, and it's 4 or 5 years later, and people have to figure out what exactly happened. You
Right.
know, how do you recommend someone write if they want to write? Is it, hey, every time you think of something, write it down? Is it just sit and write as much as you can right now while you can think about it and you're concentrating, or bits and pieces? Is there a good way to write something?
So in my ideal world, they would come to me before they write a word because all books have structure, whether they're nonfiction or fiction, there's a structure to them, just like houses, like a Cape style house versus a Dutch colonial. They're different styles, but they still have a foundation and walls and a roof, right? So the structure is the same across all genres of writing. And then once you have the structure, you have an outline. So you're not spinning your wheels, writing a lot of stuff that you're never going to use. Because I'd say 95% of the people that come to me with an already written book, I usually cut the first three chapters. Because that's kind of like you just trying to figure out how to write. Most of us can tell a story orally, but writing it is a whole other ball of wax. And with each of my clients, I just let them be creative in whatever way works best for them. So for some of them, it's collaborative ghostwriting where they're talking to me and I'm writing the chapters. For others, they like to write first and then have me edit it. And for the majority of them, it's sort of an in-between mix of that, whatever they want to, the way they want to approach it, because we all are creative in different ways.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people who can write but can't tell the story
Mm-hmm.
also,
Mm-hmm.
almost like singing, right? I mean, you
Right.
can write a great song, but you can't sing it. So it could go the other way as well. And you do some speaking too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um, how, how does that differ from with your writing? If you're writing a speech to give, and it's going to be more of a, I guess it's motivational, or it's a story as opposed to a book that someone's going to read. I mean, there's all different types of writing.
Right. But they all, to me, boil down to the same thing of having an impact. At a certain point in my career, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it's partly getting into my 50s and all of that, I realized that I only wanted to work on projects that had impact. Because when you pick up one of the books that I've written and you read it, that's like 3, 4 hours of your life to read that. So you're giving those 3 or 4 hours to me, not to your kids, not to your spouse, not to your friends or your job. You're giving them to me. And it's my job to make sure it's worth your while. So it's the same way I approach a speech. I want to make sure that whatever they're hearing, the 5, 15, 20 minutes that they're listening to me, has some kind of an impact in one way, shape, or form. So that's always been my goal.
It's hard to measure impact because you just never know what's going to hit with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and it hit with one person but not the next, and it might hit with only one person, but that could be a really important
Mm-hmm.
person, or it could be really important to them. So when you're talking about what you want to write different to what someone else wants to write, how do you differentiate what might be of consequence or of importance?
So I go with, we all have basic needs to be loved and accepted and to find our place in the world. And everything sort of boils down to that in one way, shape, or form, whether it's a self-help book or a conflict mediation book or a recovery book. They're all kind of about helping people either find themselves or love themselves or feel loved. And even it seems weird to say that about a nonfiction book, but that's definitely how it works. And so you always come back to that, because that's the touchstone that hits almost everybody. You're always looking for that common ground that everybody can relate to, whether it's loss or love or pain. Everybody can relate to those things. So you make sure that you work the book from that standpoint, so that you can, first of all, strategically build the biggest audience you possibly can. And second of all, hit as many people as you can. When I have somebody that sends me an email and says, I read your book while I was going through cancer treatments and I laughed my butt off, that makes it all worthwhile to me. I don't think about the other people that have read the book, or think about how many people may or may not potentially read the book. I write it for that person that said that it helped them get through chemo.
And when you're writing, you've been writing all these books. What are the topics, and how do you come up with the new topic that hasn't either been written by you or been written by someone else and put a new spin on it? I mean, how do you figure these things out?
So in my fiction career, my books have primarily been romance and women's fiction. I did a couple of young adult horror novels with my daughter, but 95% of my career in fiction has been in that realm. In the nonfiction, when a client comes to me, and I've done maybe 6 or 7 nonfiction books of my own, but most of them are ghostwritten, the ones that I do with the client. So it's kind of like I've done all of those as well. But when the client comes to me, I do an Amazon search. I sort of see what else is out there, what their competition is. And then I look at their story, because that's what's going to make it unique. That person's particular story, where they came from and why they do what they do, is unique to each individual. And so if you can build from that point of why this person is writing the book, then you can create something that is a little bit unique in the marketplace. Because there's only so many ways to tell a story, and there's only so many topics, but people relate to that personal connection.
Yeah, it's also my mom wants to write a book, and my joke to her is like, why does anyone care about your story?
Mm-hmm.
And I say that, but that's what you have. That's what you're fighting against,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody knows who you are. It's different
Mm-hmm.
than if someone who's known writes a book. Some people, their book goes gangbusters because of who they are, not because of
Mm-hmm.
what they wrote.
Right, right.
And you can write a really compelling story that could be extremely helpful to people.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you get that in front of enough people? And then that boils down to, why am I doing this, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
want to put my story out there, because I want to help people, because I want to make a lot of money, which, by the way, a lot of books don't
Mm-hmm.
make a lot of money, which you can talk about
Right.
better than I can.
Less than 1% of all authors make what's called a living wage, which is really more than like 50, 60,000 a year on books. And 1% of that 1% makes tons of money, makes the Stephen King type money. It's just like getting into the NFL, right? You have a million kids that are playing football, and only, so many get into the NFL with, a few hundred a year or whatever it is. So the money is not necessarily on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, because there's 16 million books on there and 100,000 are loaded every month. So there's a ton of competition. It's like a really crowded room. So you've got to market it. It's just a fact of life. If you go to a publisher tomorrow with your life story, it doesn't matter how famous you are. If you don't have a social media presence and if you don't have some kind of way of marketing the book, they're not going to pick it up, because social media has been so instrumental in the publishing industry. So if you're not comfortable with the marketing part of it, and you don't want to farm that out, then you can start doing speaking or coaching or webinars. And that's another way to make money off the book. Because the thing with a book is that it makes you look like an expert. So it can open doors that you didn't have open to you before. If they're looking at 5 different life coaches and you're the one with the book, then you're the one that people are going to remember, and you're the one that people are automatically going to think is a bigger expert just because of that book.
So, but you might not be an expert just because you wrote a book.
You might have a really good ghostwriter. I tend to only pick people to work with that I really think are compelling to me, because I'm lucky enough to be able to pick and choose who I work with throughout the year. And I'm generally juggling about 10 or 12 books at a time. So I only have a small handful of clients that I work directly with. But yeah, some people have had books written by other people, and you can tell because it doesn't sound like them. It doesn't look like them or anything like that. I want it to look and sound like the client. I want it to be a professional reflection of them and the best foot forward that they can put on paper possible.
But the people know it wasn't written by them just by the way it's titled. Or
with a bad ghostwriter will make every book sound like the ghostwriter. Like they all sound the same, and you can tell. But if I sent you pages from one of my clients' books, I guarantee you can't pick out my words from their words. I try very, very hard to sound exactly like them, just a good on paper version of them.
Right. But I mean, what I'm saying is I might not know what they sound like.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
I've heard of who they are. I don't know who they sound like. Am I getting this book thinking that they wrote it?
Well, they may have, right? No, that's the beauty of a ghostwriter. I have an NDA, so I can't tell people about certain clients that I've worked with because I've got a non-disclosure agreement. And sometimes it's a ghostwritten book and you don't know it and nobody knows it. There's a lot of people that people found out that all of their books were ghostwritten, and there's been some controversy over that. I don't care if people mention me or not. Regardless of how that ends up coming out in the end, I just want to put out the best possible product with them.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Is there anything shady about that? I don't know.
No, it's basically like paying somebody to buff up your resume, right, before you put it out there and go after a job. Your expertise is not necessarily in writing. So you're going to hire somebody that is an expert in writing to give you the best possible book. Now, if you hand it off to them and say, I don't want any part of it, I'll let the ghostwriter handle the whole thing, that's another story. To me, that's kind of cheating. I don't want to handle the whole thing. I want it to be a collaborative process because I want to get to know the client and make it unique to them. So there's no books that come through me that they sound like everything else, or they're just all created by us in-house.
Yeah, I mean, when we grow up, we hear, biography, autobiography,
Mm-hmm.
and, forewords and all of that. It's just interesting that there's so many books out there and sometimes I think just by nature of what a good writer is going to bring to the table, you're going to know. It's like I've seen people's books and I'm like, yeah, it's probably not. They probably got it just fine.
Right.
It's you're sharing your story, and I think it'd almost be a disservice if we didn't share someone's story in the best possible way, so you can get the most out of a story,
right,
rather than someone who's just telling it and
right,
you're having a conversation with them and they're barely giving you anything.
right.
Or you can be like, let's say, at a conversation you get the most out of it. How do the people you work with, do you find that you have to push a lot, or does it come easy for them? What's your experience been?
That's unique to the client. I have some that take a few months to start opening up to me. And then I have others that, like Vance Johnson, that from the very first call was just very transparent and open. I think Vance is sort of the extreme in terms of how open he's been. And a lot of other clients, it's just like sort of meeting a therapist or meeting a new neighbor. It takes you a while to trust that person is going to do justice to your story. Even if they come highly recommended, and even if you've signed a contract with them, it can take a while to make sure that they have your best interests at heart. But I found that the people that I have chosen to take on as clients, I've had something in common with them or their story. I've been through something similar. So I understand them in a way that another ghostwriter might not. And I think that helps open that bridge of communication between me and them.
Have you had to listen and say, I don't think there's a story there?
I've had a couple people that came to me very insistent about a particular type of book they wanted to write. I just had a conversation like this on Friday where this potential client is very insistent on what he wants to write. And I'm like, that's not going to sell. I don't know who's going to read that. But if you tweak your idea to go this way, then it will. It'll appeal to a broader audience. You'll have a much easier path forward. He's very firm on his particular approach that I've been in this industry forever, for my whole life. And if he wants to take it that way, that's fine. But I'm not going to work on that book because I want it to be one that people will be impacted by and read and everything else. And if he's taking the route he's insisting on, it's not going to happen. Most people end up trusting me because they see what I can do with the book and how to turn the chapters around and how to make it the best that it can possibly be. And they're pretty good about that. But I've had just a couple that I've turned away and said no. And almost everybody that comes to me, I end up tweaking their idea a little bit to fit the current marketplace.
Yeah. Well, speaking about the marketplace and a book, obviously it costs money to write a book. You want to try and make money back. If not, it's not going to be your money maker. How often do people get the money back that they've put into a book, especially if they have to pay someone to write in the cost of publishing it and getting it out there and marketing it? It's like everyone has a podcast, right? There's
Right.
people have, and then they kind of start and then they stop it. I'm not making money on the podcast, but there are people who do. What percentage of people would you say are getting their money back? The break even point.
So I don't know. I mean, they don't come to me afterwards and say that. If they're talking strictly Amazon sales, I think very few of them, just because there's 15,999,000 other books out there to compete against, right? It's really, really hard if they don't have a huge marketing engine behind them. So I tell all my clients to look at this as a permanent advertisement for your business and yourself. So it's like you took out an ad in the newspaper every day for the rest of your life. So you've got that credential forever and it opens different doors. So you have to look at it as a marketing piece, not necessarily as something that you're going to turn around. A lot of people like to see that return on the investment right away. And I tell everybody, okay, if that kind of money was able to be had on Amazon, I've got 80 odd published books. I'd be sitting here on a yacht talking to you, not in my office, right? So it's not, you're not going to see that direct correlation unless you get struck by lightning. It just doesn't work that way. But I'm honest about that's, they're not going to turn around and make all their investment back on the day they launch unless they get very, very
No, of course not at a launch, but still it costs. What does it cost to publish a book?
So
Just
all in with the book and the formatting and the cover and the content, all of the content, it's about $16,000 to $20,000, depending on how long the book is, how fast it has to be turned around, how much ghostwriting I end up doing. And that's because that's like 200 hours of work on our end. It's a few hours a month for the client, but it's a couple hundred for our end. So because we're transcribing all of the interviews, we're putting the book together and everything else. So it seems like a pretty pricey thing, but if you look at it from a marketing or advertising perspective, then you can see it as just part of your budget for the year going forward. And once you start putting author on your as a credential and you're on like LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you're choosing to use your social media time, you instantly get that extra credibility and people are more interested in what you have to say. I get approached all the time to write articles on things. And I think part of it is just because I have the word author next to my name, because they think I'm smart.
Well, the work speaks for itself. I think you can't. I guess you could. You could write a ton of books and have all this and not be good at what you do. It's unlikely that someone would get that far because it's just something would probably derail them, or someone would say, "Hey," or you wouldn't keep getting people. So I think that difference between someone who wrote one book or maybe a couple books, ton, you could tell the difference. It's kind of ironic. I hope this doesn't sound wrong. That you're there's more money in for you writing other people's books than writing your own. Right?
That's true. That's true. That's true.
It doesn't make sense for you to write your own anymore, which is,
right.
maybe there are more ghostwriters out there than I think who started to think, hey, this is a better idea. it's just smart business,
Right.
because your
Yeah.
writing is, it's a gift, and a talent and a skill. But it is ironic to be able to do that, which is good. People, look, if someone can't do it and you want to have
Hmm.
something like that out there, there's a ton of stuff. I mean, even in the
Right.
graphics world, in a smaller extent, I guess the good thing about what you're saying is it's an investment that actually you'll possibly get some of that back.
Hmm.
Even if you get none of it back, there's value to it, but there's always
Hmm.
a chance that you can sell. It's a great giveaway, right? You
Right.
start giving
Right.
people books. There's a lot of tricks in this with like all the top, like I'm there in a top bestseller list for this category of that, and the third one, and it's crazy how
Right.
they, it's like on LinkedIn you see like, well, top. Someone wrote like they're a top 40 CEO. Like, well, what does that even
Where's
mean?
that
I don't
at?
even know what
Right.
that means. You try and put these
Yeah.
labels on them to sort of, I don't know, to me it feels a little bit more gimmicky, but there's a lot of that. People buying
Hmm.
200 copies of their own books or printing and giving it out. So,
Hmm.
people buy. I mean, there's tricks to all of that.
Yeah, there are strategies to hit bestseller lists with your launch on Amazon, and USA Today and New York Times is strictly by sales. So you can't fudge that. You absolutely have to have the sales in order to hit that. But there's ways to get number one on Amazon. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stick or it's going to take off or that all of a sudden they're going to put you at the top of the algorithm. But there's ways to do it. And if you really need that stamp of best-selling author, then there's ways you can do it. But I don't think that that's really necessarily the way to go forward because, like you said, it doesn't mean that much outside of that. If you're smart and you're using it as a way to open other doors for speaking or coaching or webinars, then that's the smart way to go about it.
I read The Go Giver,
Hmm.
Bob Berg. He's going to join the show next month, I think. I don't read
Nice.
a lot. I wish
Hmm.
I would read a lot more.
Right.
I need to read and get like done with it. I can't read like a couple chapters a day, and next thing you know, so everything I read has to go quick. So it's got to
Hmm.
be two things: either short enough for me to
Hmm.
accomplish that, or just really compelling where I don't want to put it down.
Hmm.
That's what I think people need to write. Is it going to be short enough where I can just read it and it's not going to be this whole big thing, or compelling enough that people are just going to, like, I can't
Right.
put this down and other people are going to recommend it. And I got a ton of books that are just sitting here waiting
Hmm.
for me to read, which I'd like to read. But it's tough. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot more readers out there and they make it easier. So
Hmm.
how has it changed over the years from when you started to now, the publishing world, the book world? What's the biggest difference?
So Amazon, first of all, because when I first got published, there was no self-publishing. There was no Amazon. I'm old enough to be way before that ever happened. And because of Amazon, because of the quick turnaround kind of books, shorter books are key. Most people don't have the time, like you said, to read a 100,000 word book. I don't have a 100,000 word book in front of me, but they're really thick. Most people in the nonfiction space are doing 30 to maybe 50,000 words because it's something that you can do. Like this is 36. You can do this in a few hours. Um, so that's changed a lot. The fact that people have the power in their own hands has changed a lot, but that also means that there's a lot of crap out there. There are a lot of people that just write something and put it up on Amazon without even an editor or never mind a proofreader or a professional formatter. And you could tell. And that kind of tarnishes the self-publishing industry because there are other people that are doing an excellent job at self-publishing. It's become a completely different animal, and the marketing, everything is different. There's no book tours and book signings and things like that like there used to be unless you're a top star. It's changed significantly. The New York publishing houses have been very slow to shift and turn the ship to face into this change, and like they're just now starting to put books on sale on Amazon. We've been telling us authors have been telling them that for years to be able to do that. So they've been hit pretty hard between COVID and bookstores closing and then Amazon. So they're having to re-strategize how they do books as well.
I write articles on
Hmm.
LinkedIn. Um, I think it's good to share that content and sort of show your writing. Hopefully, you get better at it as you go, and
Hmm.
people give you feedback. The difference is it's not going to be on like one topic; it's on a lot of them, but it is good content.
Hmm.
Is that a strategy that might be better than writing a book? Like to sit down and because it's time consuming, it's
Hmm.
costly. Um, you know, you write 15 ways to make money on your book.
Mhm.
There's got to be other ways also to do that similar. And I encourage people to take a look at the website,
Mhm.
jumpstartcreativesolutions.com, to get that information. But there might be similar. I mean, is it for everyone? Should everyone write a book?
It depends on their 5-year plan. I'm a little bit different than most editors and ghostwriters because I have a marketing background. I was a director of communications for a marketing agency for several years. So I have that marketing piece that most book editors don't have. And so I'm looking at where are you going to go in 5 years? Do you want to be speaking? Do you want to be coaching? Do you want to have a presence as an author? Do you want a 5-book series? Where do you want to go? Well, if you don't want to do that and you just want to build up your expertise, then yes, having a really good blog or a continual newsletter or some kind of continual good content is a way to do that. You can do it with mini ebooks that people either download for free or they pay 99 cents for that can do the same thing. Not everybody has to do a big full book, and not everybody necessarily has the time or the budget to do that. And there's a lot of different ways to establish that expertise. But author of XYZ is still stands out despite all of the books on Amazon. It still sets you apart.
But it could be sold on Amazon and elsewhere.
Yep.
Whereas it say I have a book, don't put it on Amazon because it's going to get lost in the sea.
I put it on Amazon because of the ease for you. You don't have to ship them everywhere. Amazon will do it for you. And frankly, Amazon is the cheapest printer I've found. So I load the books up there. You can buy author copies, and my books print for about $3 a piece, which is cheaper than any printing place I've found in the Tampa Bay area. So if I need 5 for a meeting, or if I need 500 for a speaking gig, then I can get them from Amazon and have them drop ship right to there. So that helps a lot. You don't have to buy 100 or 200 at a time. You can buy whatever number you want. And it also makes it available everywhere.
Your books that you're writing is self-published for others.
My clients, most of them are self-published, not all. Like Dr. Nasola, who is the White House immunologist, his book comes out in January. That's through Norton, and I edited his book and sort of collaboratively ghost wrote some of the content for his book for a traditional publisher. Most of my clients, 9 times out of 10, are self-publishing because they have more control. You make more money. You might make far more royalties per book.
Yeah. So when we hear like these huge book deals, I think Clinton or Obama had gotten a few of them. It's just they know that it's going to sell because of who it is. It almost doesn't even matter what they write at this point. And then keep coming out with more books, and people are generally going to read it. Different from a fiction, right? Because a fiction it's got to be good. They're not going to want to read the next one. Like enough people there has to be a buzz about it. People could just like someone and read their book and be like, yeah, that was good. That was worth reading. You don't hear about a lot of these big book deals anymore.
No, because publishing took such a hit during COVID. It really did. They've got these big Manhattan rents. Everybody's working from home. People weren't buying books. And then when a recession or some kind of financial setback happens for the country, books are one of the last things to go because they're like $5-10, but they're also one of the last things to come back when people start rebounding financially. So it has a big impact in terms of what the publishing companies have for money. And yeah, they do give the $5 million to James Patterson and $5,000 to Jane Doe, new author. But it's still pretty exciting, I think, to have a book with your name on it, no matter what.
Yeah, I think so. I think I think that people should write a book. I mean, I will eventually write a book. I would think it's just a part of time. Time and money is always when you have the time. Sometimes you don't have the money, and when you have the money, you don't have the time. And I think it's one of those things that you want to make sure I put out an article. It's okay if it's no good, I delete it or whatever. You put a book, like you said, that's out there. Someone's going to read it. Hopefully.
And judge it and leave a review on Amazon.
Yeah.
But that's why you want to make sure it's really, really good, right? You don't want any representation of yourself to be out there and be negative and for people to be giving you multiple 1-star reviews. It has to be good. It has to deliver something for the time and money people invested.
It's something weird about like my friend always laughs at me for saying you never say a movie's bad. And I'm like, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to like as a movie. And I feel that's the same way in a book. I've never really read a bad book. So I feel like I have a good idea of what I'm going to, to like?
Mhm.
Are most people like that? I mean, I pick sometimes out of a cover. What does the cover look like? What does the title
Mhm.
look like? I mean, there's just so many options out there.
There is. And that's why that the cover itself is so important because it's a little thumbnail on your computer, right? So it's a 1-inch square and that cover has to grab people and be compelling. And then the back cover copy also has to be compelling because people judge whether they're going to read a book or not by the cover, the back cover copy, and the first couple pages. So those are the most important parts that you want to make sure you get really, really right. And then of course the rest of the book should be good. I'm not saying just make 2 good first pages and then, not write anything decent after that. But I think that most people can choose a good book based on that. If you see something that's got a typo on the back cover copy, then you're like, oh, this is not going to be a quality read. This is not going to be good. Or if the back cover copy bores you, just that couple of paragraphs, then you're going to be sure that the book itself is going to bore you. That back cover copy is a promise to the reader. If it's funny, then you're promising the reader it's going to be a funny book. If it's dramatic, you're promising them that there'll be lots of drama in there. So that promise needs to deliver so that they'll keep coming back for more.
I want to write a book. It's going to be the sales playbook, and
Mhm.
it's just going to be a blank throughout. There's no playbook. Everyone's giving you a playbook and the
Right.
blueprint of all this stuff of how to do this and how to do that. I find most of it is just it's hit or miss. It's like
Mhm.
maybe it'll work for me, maybe it won't work.
Right.
This works for you, that's great. Um, but we shouldn't be selling that stuff as like,
Mhm.
hey, do this, and that's my mom used to have like a whole office full of these self help
Mhm.
books. There's a lot of them that have good information in it.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of them of people who are just they want it was like get rich quick, right? And that was
Mhm.
book. Well, why are you writing? Why do you have to write more than one volume if it's
Right.
you made enough money off of all the stuff that you've
Right.
written that you don't need that? It's
Right.
I don't know. It's libraries full of that stuff. But what do what else can people do to ensure a successful book? Just on the surface, like we talked about, a
Mhm.
title, a good cover, a back is having getting someone famous or well known to
Mhm.
write something about it, or endorse it. We see that a lot. People who
Mhm.
you've never heard of, but they're connected to someone who's well known. Is that a powerful tool?
It is. I actually have a client who knows Jon Favreau, who did Iron Man, and he's getting a blurb from him. I mean, it's not really that this is John's wheelhouse or his lane, but just seeing his name on the cover of the book will be enough to sell it, right? So the forwards can help if you're not famous and you can find somebody more famous than yourself to write it. And when I did writing compelling fiction, I went to a bunch of authors who are more well known than I am and had them write something about it so that the launch went well. You have to have quality. There's just so much crap out there that you have to have quality. When you look at Netflix versus what's on YouTube, they're picking quality by and large. You know that you're going to have a genuinely good experience for the most part when you go on Netflix. You go on YouTube and just randomly pick stuff. Not necessarily is that going to happen. So you need to have a quality book cover and a quality amount of content. It has to be good because you're competing with a lot of other people.
Well, I've got a ton of movies that you should have mentioned before Iron Man.
Okay, so my husband is the one that knows all the movie things. Like he'll see somebody and be like, that guy was the one that sat in the back row in Weird Science. And I'm like,
Yeah,
how do you even remember Weird Science? Never
you
mind
know.
remember that guy.
John Favreau, I think he wrote and directed the movie Chef. He's
Mhm.
great in it.
Yes.
That's a definite recommend to watch for him.
Mhm.
If you say John Favreau, the first thing I think of is Swingers with Vince
Mhm.
Vaughn in Vegas.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, that's a good movie. And I love Chef. I watch his series on Netflix where he cooks with
yeah,
the other chef. It's really good. I love him.
yeah. I think I love movies, so that's just what guys do. We remember weird
Mhm.
lines from movies,
Right.
weird things, and weird stats, and then can't remember an anniversary or birthday. Right?
Right.
I
And
think
there's
that
no way to make money off of that weird knowledge of all these actors. I
some
wish there
people,
was.
some people have. It's crazy. It's funny because like we watch Jeopardy all the time,
Mhm.
and it's some people are really bad at sports and entertainment. They'll know
Mhm.
the things you could never even imagine that you would ever need to know, and they all know it. And then it's like John Favreau. What movie was John Favreau in? Or
Mhm.
and people wouldn't get it.
So
Um,
here's an interesting tidbit. One of my books was a Jeopardy answer one year. I
Okay.
didn't even watch the episode. It was my dad sent me the tape of it, and it was about romance novels because that was it's way before I started my nonfiction stuff. And they had different titles from Harlequin that I had worked for at the time, and it ended up being my book. Now, of course, they didn't put book by Shirley Jump; they just put the title of my book. But that was my big claim to fame with Jeopardy. I
Oh,
just forgot his name.
that's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. There was a movie where someone kept saying, "Hey, they're mentioning you on TV again." Uh, it would have been better if they had your name on there, but you know,
Right.
give or take,
Right.
it's pretty good to be associated with the Jeopardy question.
Yeah,
Um,
I would have had a lot more sales if they just put my name up there too.
you can put, you can use it as content now and put, "Hey,
Right.
that's my book, that's me."
Right.
Um, how many fiction books did you write?
I think 78 fiction because some of my 85 is nonfiction. I think it's 78 fiction novels in 24 countries, but I'm not sure. I don't really keep track. I'm really bad about that.
And
So
why did you? If they didn't sell as well as you would want to, why do you keep writing fiction books?
oh, they still sell okay. I mean, I'm not disparaging that. I probably, it's a 50-50 with my income. I still write 4 or 5 books a year myself for
Okay,
myself. But that market is an up and down, a roller coaster, whereas some other work is a little bit steadier. And I've always been that person because I've almost always worked for myself. I think I had a real job for one summer. I've worked for myself the whole time. And so I've always been a multiple eggs in multiple baskets sort of person with my business. And it breaks up my day. It's not all fiction, it's not all nonfiction. So no, they've done good, but they come and go. The whole market comes and goes.
how many stories are they? Like, are they all related to each other, or there's like five different sort of series that have a bunch, or they're all different?
There's a variety. I mean, I have a bunch of connected series, and then I have some that stand alone. And sometimes I connect a book in the writing without even telling anybody. You know, I just throw in a character from another book, and then readers get all excited, like they found an Easter egg. You know.
Is it easier to write connecting?
No, not for me because I don't remember. Like a book takes about a year in the real publishing world, not real publishing world, in the New York publishing world. It takes about a year. So I'm writing the third book right now in a 3 book series, which means I wrote the first one 2.5, 3 years ago. I don't remember any of that stuff. So I have to take really good notes or kind of keep flipping through all the time to figure out what color everybody's eyes were and things like that. Because the readers will let you know if you get that wrong. I changed the sex of a baby once between 2 books, a baby that never even appears on the page. It's just so and so had a baby. And I can't tell you how much reader mail I got about that. I was like, really sorry, this baby never appears on the
Yeah,
page. It's just a baby,
good to have people paying attention though.
right?
That's the good news. Yeah, I think
Right.
it's that's an interesting thing about you know, writing. What become some people are better at than others, whether it's the recurring, whether it's the one. The difference between
Mm-hmm.
doing a movie and a TV show, like you have a whole year to get your series
Mm-hmm.
and figure it out with loops and could have some down. Like, ah, this is kind of boring. It's fine. In a movie, it's like that's it. You can't have a bad half of it be bad.
Right, right.
Or you know, they're not. Overall, they're just going to think it's bad. So in the series of a book, if you have a great book and the next one is
Mm-hmm.
might kill the whole thing.
It could.
Um,
It'll in publishing, just like in music, it'll kill your career. One bad book, one bad spate of sales, and it can kill your career. And because they'll look at that sales data and say, well, she sold really bad on this book out of 75. Well, one did badly. But they're very risk averse in publishing in New York. So I do a little mix of both. I have independently published, self-published books that I've put out there, and then I have the New York books that I do as well, just to hedge my bets and you know.
you do some speaking. You help do
Mhm.
some ghostwriting. I mean, part of this is teaching people how
Mhm.
to write effectively, so they can
Mhm.
at least jumpstart to use
Right.
uh, the process, whether they use you or not. Hopefully, they use
Mhm.
you know throughout the whole process. But
Right.
there's value to being taught and you speaking with them and helping in the process at
Mhm.
least to get everything going.
Yeah, I'm happy to coach people. I'm happy to just do the outline with them. I'm more about trying to get a really good, impactful story out there than whether I get that contract and end up working on that book or not. because most of my work comes from word of mouth. So people are referred to me for the most part. And I'm not too worried about landing every single person that comes to me, but I would love to work with them enough to shape their idea into something marketable and impactful.
What are your favorite books, nonfiction and fiction, that you haven't worked on? Do you have a few that just come to mind that?
Nonfiction. What did I just? Well, I love the David Goggins book, "Can't Stop Me," I think it is. I loved that book. My son gave it to me for Mother's Day, and I just read James Clear's Atomic Habits. I like those sort of self-help sort of books that are about challenging yourself in nonfiction. And then in fiction, I love Stephen King and Joe Hill and Dennis Lehane. And I don't read my own genre. I read other genres just so that nothing bleeds in. So I love those books that'll scare me when I'm trying to go to sleep.
But reading does help you in your
Mhm.
thoughts about you reading and understand, especially from some of the greats like Stephen King. And
Right. Yeah, it makes you try harder because you look at how somebody like Joe Hill puts the words on the page. And Joe is Stephen's son, and he's really, really talented. And I look at how he crafted a sentence, and I think, I got to try harder. I've got to try to be that good and put that kind of effort into it. And crafting a sentence is like crafting a baked dish, right? There's a lot of little nuances and little ingredients that go into it to make it more powerful than the way you did it the first time. So it's all about learning to be better and stronger and better at my job every time I pick up a book.
which becomes easiest? Is there, the drama, the fiction, the nonfiction, comedy, trying to be funny? Which do you find that you're maybe better at, or easier to write for you?
It's all, I like writing everything. I love writing. And I write other genres when I'm not writing my genre so that I can sort of spread my wings a little bit. And that's how the young adult horror came about. I just had been working on this book that I had no intentions of selling. And my daughter saw it and said, "You should try to sell this." And we sold it to Houghton Mifflin. Um, my favorite part really is the puzzle of it, how to figure out the structure and how to make it go together, and taking that person's story and their idea for a book and blending it into something really impactful. I love the puzzle of a book. I really do. I get all excited about putting all the pieces in place.
Are the pieces being put in place as you're going, or is it like I kind of put the pieces in place and now I put it on paper?
Sometimes both, sometimes one or the other. Some clients, because when I'm with a client, we're getting to know each other for the first 3 chapters, and I expect that to be a relatively fluid process because they're learning to trust me. I'm learning how they speak and all of that. So there's times when we decided we were going to go in this direction, and then 3 chapters in decide we're going to tweak it and go into this direction. So sometimes we're assembling the puzzle midway through the book and turning it into something else. Or I have some coaches and stuff that they start moving into different areas. A book takes about a year to write. So sometimes they're like, "Oh, now I'm focusing exclusively on this. Can we tweak the book's approach to fit their new way of doing business?"
Yeah, I like, again, I watch movies a lot, so there's so many. It's funny how when you start talking about, hey, I saw this movie and it was a book, right? But they converted to it, and the people who read the book, people are very adamant, like, hey, I don't want to watch the movie, or I want it to be exactly the same and not take any
Mhm.
liberties. Where do you stand with watching movies that are books that you've read?
I have to read, if I'm going to read the book, I have to read it first because the book is going to be a richer experience for me because I love fiction. But if they change it to go on screen, I understand the process behind that. It's a different way of grabbing audiences, so it's got to be a different way of approaching the series. Like I read Made, which was on Netflix, and it's a nonfiction memoir. It was really, really well done. But the series, the middle episodes, like totally went off in a new direction. And I actually got out my book to make sure that that wasn't in there because I thought that was there, and it wasn't. But it was more for dramatic effect and to get, I think it was 6 or 8 episodes out of it, because they needed to do that in order to capture the audience for different reasons. So,
If Yeah, I think a lot of times when I've read he's just not that into you. Really,
hmm
really good book.
hmm
The movie
hmm
was terrible. It was just
hmm
couldn't convert it.
right.
Same with the Jerky Boys. The Jerky Boys, I love listening to their stuff, and then they tried
hmm
to make a movie out of it, and it was really, really bad movie.
hmm
If you could pick one book that you've done and put it into a movie, which one would it be? Have you thought about that? Have you tried to do it? Has anyone
Um,
asked you? Have you tried to make it happen?
so I've had 8 books looked at, but they haven't been optioned. So 8 different times in my career, different production companies have come to me and asked to see a book. And there's a lot of factors that go into play on whether they'll option it or not. It's always my favorite book is always the one I'm working on right now, which doesn't have a publication date because this is something a little bit different for me that I'm working on right now. That's always my favorite. It's like the new baby that you have. You love that cute little new baby more so than the annoying toddler. So I love all of them, but I do have one that's a mother-daughter road trip that I wrote a year after my mother died, and it's the one book that's the most like me because there's a lot of conversations that I had with my mother as she was dying that made it into the book. So that one, I guess, would be the most special to me.
And who's playing who?
Well, I don't know because now I'm in my 50s, so I don't think I could get away with, somebody young and pretty. But maybe I don't know. I have no idea, and I don't know. I'd have to ask my husband because he would remember these actors' names more so than me, right? Like I don't remember anybody.
Yeah, it's always interesting who they pick to play.
Mhm.
Sometimes they really nail it, and sometimes you're just like, I don't know. I don't know what it's like.
Right,
You need to have this person in there. We don't care if it makes sense or not.
right.
Um, well, that
Like
would
like Tom Cruise for Jack Reacher, because Jack Reacher in the books is like 6'2" and 250 pounds. He's a big guy. And when I saw that as the original version, I was like, what? They just got it because of Tom Cruise, and he doesn't have any of Reacher's personality. But then when they redid the series on Amazon Prime, that's closer to what Reacher is like in Lee Child's books. Still not exactly perfect, but closer, much closer.
and nobody realizes how short Tom Cruise is until you start mentioning it and like
Right?
having him. They do a very good job of not showing that
Yeah.
in the movies. Um, who would you want to write a book about you to share your story? Is there someone out there who's a writer that you think would do that would be great at it?
I would love to just meet and sit down and talk to Stephen King. Like, I don't know that he'd write a book about me, but I would love to even have my name as like a secondary character that gets killed off by the monster early on. I've always lived near where he is, sort of, and had a couple of missed opportunities to meet him, but he's been my favorite, hands down, forever.
He's really vocal in politics these days. Are
Yeah.
you follow him on social media?
Not so much because he's mostly on Twitter, and I'm hardly ever on Twitter. But he's been vocal in the merger between Simon and Schuster and Penguin because it's going to totally transform the landscape. And I did post on LinkedIn and Twitter about that because I was one of the publishing companies I worked for merged with another one, and they're like, "Oh, there'd be more opportunities to authors." No, there wasn't. There's a lot of attrition because there's only so many spaces on the shelf, and they're not going to give those up to other people.
You still see bookstores are they're pretty big. They're filled.
Mhm.
People want to go to them. Does that shock you a little bit based on the world that we're living in, everything going online?
Not me, because I am a paper girl. I order the paper copies. I have a book sitting on my doorstep right now from Amazon. I love real books, and I would much rather have those than an e-reader book any day of the week.
Yeah, I can't.
So I
It's
think
not
people
for
like
me.
me love the bookstore, the tangible experience of it, going in, looking at them, picking them all up. Yeah, I love it.
I like the book too. I can't imagine ever reading a book on a reader and not. And I like the hardcover too
Hmm.
instead of the soft cover. I don't know why.
Hmm.
It just uh, feels better.
Right,
Like
right.
with the jacket and all that. Feels more. What I hated in college was, and there's probably a lot of that now, is we have to you have to buy a second edition because we changed three lines in it. Now
Right.
we got to pay 70 more. How much are people really giving new material out there when they're putting these new editions and rewrites?
I don't, it depends on the author. I mean, some have added whole chapters. I've had a couple of authors that, three or four that we've done a second edition with, and they've completely revamped the book because things changed for them or they learned new information, and others that just added a couple of chapters. I don't think you can call it a second edition unless you're adding something, a few thousand words. If you just kind of buff up a couple of words and call it a second edition, that's kind of cheating to
Well,
me.
what about how about like a second, maybe not a second edition, but a second book, the
Mhm.
next chapter, and then continuing it on. But it's really a lot of the same stuff that they've done.
Well, there's a lot of series that are out there. I just picked up the Badass series, and Jen Cicero has like, I think, 5 books out, and they're all basically the exact same thing, just packaged differently. Your badass in life and in business, in love, and here's the handbook on how to do it. It's the same information repackaged. But publishers, if they have a winning thing, if they have something that wins and it takes off, they're going to want you to do 5 more just like it because they figure that they've hit on the little golden nugget of what will be successful. I don't think a lot of readers really like that. And a lot of times second, third, fourth books don't do as well because they're repackaging.
If you had the option, money is not a factor. You're going to make the same amount of money no matter what,
Mm-hmm.
and you could choose between writing your own books, writing someone else's books, being a speaker out there, or like doing this sort of coach
Mm-hmm.
consulting thing. What do you think you would choose?
Oh, I'd pick writing my own books, hands down.
Yeah.
I've loved that the most out of my whole life. I do like, and I'm not disparaging my clients in any way. I do like working on their books. It's always a challenge to me. But if I can just sit here and make stuff up all day, that's when I'm really, really happy. I love writing fiction, and I do it for no money, but I don't tell the publishers
Yeah.
that.
We all have this stuff we do for no money. We don't tell
Right.
anyone. Some of it I'm already doing for no money, so I get it. I can tell myself that, or tell my wife that. Uh, if you could choose, you're a great writer, but you can choose to be a hit writer for movies, books, or songs. What would you choose?
Probably still books, because books are my favorite. Now, my husband, of course, is a movie lover. He doesn't read books. He doesn't like reading books. So he'd want me to pick movies. But if you write a really good book and it's compelling and people love it, then the movie industry is going to pick it up anyways. So I'd rather do the books. And my daughter's the songwriter. My kids got the musical gene. That skipped me completely.
Yeah, so she writes. She does writing.
She writes and performs her own music. She's a part of like a duo synth kind of thing. I
Okay.
totally got butchered whatever it is that she does. But it's Funayure is her band, and she's working on her fourth album with them right now.
Wow, that's great.
Hmm.
What do you think you'd be doing if you weren't writing at all? Did you ever think about that? I mean, it feels like you've been writing forever. If
Yeah.
you had to change and do something else, is there something in your mind growing up, or over the last few years that you thought I'd be good at this, or this is what I would want to do?
I probably teach. I did a little bit of teaching, and I really do love teaching, except now teaching is so much politics and paperwork and all of that that I don't think I would enjoy it. But that would probably be if I couldn't write. But I can't imagine what would keep me from being able to write.
Yeah.
Maybe amputating my hands.
Or
Please
is it
don't let that
misery?
happen to me. Right?
Misery, isn't that what misery was?
Right. Yeah. She amputated his or chained him down and broke his legs so that he had to stay in bed and write
Everything.
that book. Yeah.
That was a movie I think that did well.
Hmm.
I think the John Grisham movies are great. The Firm,
Hmm.
and what was the one with with Matt Damon and Danny DeVito?
I don't know. Some of them do translate well. I think Misery translated well from the page to the movie. I think that Kathy Bates did a great job, and in making you just as scared of her on the movie as you were in the book.
Yeah, I think it's a shame. I think a lot of people would be a teacher if they got paid more. There's just a lot of
Hmm.
obstacles to making someone want to be a teacher, and I think there's a lot of great teachers out there, but there's a lot that probably could have been great if we would have given
Hmm.
an incentive to want to be a teacher. It's one of those. It's tough.
Yeah, our priorities are screwed up. We really should be, no offense against the athletes, but we really should be putting that money into teachers who are building our next generation. My
Yeah,
daughter-in-law, my stepdaughter, I'm sorry, is a teacher, and she puts in so much work and hours above and beyond what she does in the classroom. And I wish she got paid more for what she does.
yeah. I think the whole school system and what we're teaching and needs a big revamp in Florida.
Hmm.
We'll see what
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
See what happens in Florida. We'll cross our fingers if you're a teacher in
Right.
Florida. But yeah, I actually already know the answer to the last question, but we're going to talk
Hmm.
about it anyway.
Okay.
We let everyone out of the Wolff Den with the same question. Who would you spend a day with if you could choose anyone in the world? They have to be alive and you can't be related to them. And
Hmm.
you've already given us your answer, which I assume
Right.
would be
Oh yeah.
Stephen King.
Yeah, and if he wasn't up to it, his son, who's like I said, an even better maybe writer than him. His son's really good.
He'll be up for it. So when you're talking to Stephen King, what do you want to talk about? What questions do you have? Like, is there one question that you would really like to do, and would maybe start writing about something? Like, figure out something to write together and sort of pick his brain as you're kind of
Hmm.
writing together to work with. But is there a question you'd love to know from him?
So he inspired me so much in the beginning because he quit writing. He had thrown his manuscript away when Carrie ended up getting bought, or he ended up finding an agent for Carrie. And I had gone through the same thing. I wrote 10 books in 8 years before I sold my first one. And I had thrown everything away and quit. It's a long story that I won't get into now, but that sort of inspired me, that he had gone through the same thing, and then look at what he became. So I think it's more about, because I mean, everybody asks, where do you get your ideas? How do you write the book? And it's kind of like, it just happens, right? It's like being able to sing. It just happens. You can do it. So I think I'd ask him more about what he enjoyed most about the journey, and how he would have done it differently, maybe.
It's not a bad question. He might have answered that somewhere, but it's nothing like sitting in front of someone and getting an answer straight from the horse's mouth.
Right.
Yeah, I say, if we have enough influence and money and power, we can make all of this stuff happen. So maybe my way to get all that is once my book hits the market, I have a few ideas. It's so interesting, like the type of stuff that you can write. The thing that compelled me to write my book was this kid who wrote, "I hope they serve beer in hell." Got on TV, and he was like this big star, and it was just a bunch of what I believe is probably not true stories, but it just people loved it. They ate it up, and they wanted it. People like to read about things. It doesn't even matter if it's true, whether you say it's true, right? That's why fiction and nonfiction are all alike, is it sells. It doesn't, and even the nonfiction that is just based on a true story, or it's really fabricated, but it's sort of the idea. So yeah, I encourage everyone, if you have a book in your mind, reach out to Shirley and get some information on the best way, whether it's jumpstartcreativesolutions.com or book a call. If you're really serious about it and you're close to doing it, that's the difference, right? I mean, someone's really serious about it, they're close to it and they're ready, have that conversation, or let's get a little bit more information, and there's some stuff that you offer that can sort of push you as to why you should, and maybe get things rolling.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
Too. Yeah. So
I appreciate it.
Check her out, and I look forward to seeing you at Mark's events again, Win Again
Thanks.
Academy, and in the club room. It's been just so many great people in there, and that's how we met. So check it out. There's another event this week, I think on Wednesday, and that's it. I look forward to seeing the next steps and the next books that come out from you, and hopefully sending people your way to get more books out there that people can read.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay. You too. Bye-bye.